My name is Logan Bennett. I'm 35 years old and the CEO of Bennett Enterprises, a leading real estate and investment company in New York. Most people see me as a ruthless millionaire who only cares about numbers and power. But that day changed everything. As I crossed a busy street corner, I saw a woman sitting on the cold sidewalk with two little girls clinging to her sides. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, but when she lifted her head, my heart stopped. It was Olivia Carter, the girl I had loved in high school, the girl who never even noticed me. And now she was here begging on the streets with her daughters. I never imagined our lives would cross paths like this again. I watched her for a long moment, the world around me fading into a distant blur of car horns and people brushing past. My chest felt tight, like something invisible had wrapped around my ribs and squeezed. Olivia Carter. The name echoed through my mind, like an old song I'd buried, but never forgotten. She was once the girl who floated through the school halls with laughter trailing behind her, her hair shimmering under classroom lights, her eyes never meeting mine, unless it was to cut me down with a single careless word. I was the quiet boy in the back row with secondhand shoes and notebooks stained by the leaking roof of our apartment. She was beauty and light, everything I never believed I deserved. And now she was sitting on a filthy sidewalk, clutching two trembling little girls in her arms, her head bowed low, as though the weight of the sky itself pressed down on her shoulders. Her hair was tangled and dirty, framing a face drawn by exhaustion and silent suffering. One of the twins, the smaller one with tear-streaked cheeks, pressed herself into her mother's chest, sobbing softly. The other girl sat perfectly still, eyes wide and empty, staring at nothing. That look, it was the look of a child who had stopped believing in comfort. I felt my pulse roar in my ears. For years, I'd built walls around my life. Granite walls, iron gates, numbers and power. They kept me safe from ever being that weak, unwanted boy again. But now, looking at Olivia, those walls crumbled like wet paper. I couldn't just walk away. Even if a part of me whispered she deserved this fall from grace, even if she had once been cruel to me, I couldn't leave her here. I stepped forward, my polished shoes almost brushing the frayed edge of her thin blanket on the pavement. "Olivia," I said, my voice cracking. I hated how weak it sounded. She didn't look up at first. Then slowly, like a ghost rising from the ashes, her eyes lifted to meet mine. For a fleeting second, something flickered there, confusion, disbelief, then horror. Her mouth trembled. "Logan," she whispered. My name felt like broken glass on her tongue. We stared at each other, two people bound by a past neither of us wanted to remember. The sounds of the city raged around us, but inside that small space there was only silence. Silence filled with regret and old wounds that had never healed. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice low, unable to hide the raw ache tearing through my chest. She looked away, clutching the girls tighter, as if I might rip them from her arms. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "We're fine. Go away, Logan. Fine. God." The words stabbed into me like a dull knife. One child was shivering from hunger, the other's lips were cracked and bleeding. Nothing about them was fine. "No," I said. "You're coming with me." Her head snapped up. Fear, pride, anger, all of it flashing in her eyes. "I can't," she rasped. "Just leave us alone." "I'm not leaving you here to die on this filthy street," I growled. "I won't take no for an answer." One of the girls whimpered, her tiny fingers digging into Olivia's torn sweater. My throat closed up as her desperate little eyes met mine. Eyes that shouldn't know this kind of suffering. Eyes that shouldn't know fear like this. I pulled out my phone and called my driver. "Be here in 5 minutes," I ordered before slipping it back into my coat pocket. I reached out a hand. My fingers hovered in the air, trembling ever so slightly. "Please, Olivia," I said softer now. "Let me help." For a long moment, she just stared at my hand, like it was a snake about to strike. Then, with a shuddering breath, she reached out and took it. Her hand was so small, so cold, so fragile. I closed my fingers around hers, feeling every bone beneath her skin, and gently helped her to her feet. She swayed her legs, weak from days without proper food. I slipped an arm around her waist to steady her, ignoring the way my chest burned at the closeness. When the car pulled up, I lifted the smaller girl into my arms. She didn't even resist, just curled up against my chest, like a kitten desperate for warmth. Olivia carried the other twin, and we slid into the back seat together. As the car pulled away, I glanced at her. Her head was turned to the window, tears sliding silently down her dirt-streaked cheeks. In that moment, I saw not the girl who had once mocked me, but a woman drowning in her own shattered world. And for reasons I couldn't explain, or maybe didn't want to admit, I knew I would do anything to pull her out of it. I sat beside her in the back seat, the little girl curled against my chest, her soft breaths dampening the collar of my shirt with each tiny exhale. Outside the city blurred by in streaks of yellow and white, but inside the car it felt like time had stopped. Olivia pressed her forehead to the window, eyes unblinking, staring at nothing and everything at once. Streetlights swept across her face, revealing the hollow planes of her cheeks, the purplish shadows beneath her eyes, and something deeper than bruises, wounds life had carved into her spirit long before tonight. I wanted to say something, anything to lift her from that silent darkness. But what words could reach a woman who had been dragged so far down that she'd forgotten there was even a sky above her? When we pulled up to my mansion, she flinched at the sight. The towering white columns, the wrought iron gates, the grand windows glowing with golden light. It looked like another world, and perhaps it was. A world she believed she no longer belonged in. She hesitated at the foot of the steps, clutching her daughters close. Her hands trembled as she brushed their hair back from their faces, as if to reassure them or herself that this wasn't just another cruel mirage before the nightmare returned. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of her fear. "We'll leave in the morning. I promise we won't bother you any longer." "No." My voice came out sharper than I intended, cutting through the cold night air. I forced myself to soften it. "You'll stay here, as long as you need." She didn't answer. Her head bowed, tangled hair falling forward like a veil to hide her tears. Part of me wanted to brush it back to lift her chin and remind her of who she once was, of who she still could be. But I didn't. Not yet. She needed dignity more than comfort right now. Mrs. Harper, my housekeeper, opened the door. Her eyes widened at the sight of Olivia and the girls, their clothes torn and their faces streaked with dried tears and dirt. But she said nothing, bless her. Questions could come later. Right now, I only needed obedience. "Prepare a room for them," I said firmly. She nodded and slipped silently into the house. I guided Olivia to the living room and lit the fireplace, the crackle of flames breaking the suffocating quiet between us. Warm light danced across her pale skin, chasing away the shadows clinging to her like ghosts. The girls collapsed onto the couch, their tiny bodies sinking into plush cushions, eyes fluttering shut almost instantly, too exhausted to process the softness cradling them. Olivia stood trembling before the fire, her arms wrapped around her chest as though holding herself together by force. Tears welled in her eyes again, catching the flickering light like shattered crystals. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. I don't know what to say. Really, thank you. A lump rose in my throat, tightening until I could barely swallow. Anger, sorrow, regret, they all mixed into something sharp and burning behind my ribs. "You don't have to thank me," I managed to say. "Rest. We'll talk in the morning." But she didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked on the flames, flickering with questions she didn't dare voice. "Why are you doing this for me?" Because despite everything she had become, I still saw the girl she used to be. Because no matter how many years had passed, my heart refused to unlove her. I turned away before the truth could escape my lips. As I walked toward my office, her voice followed me, so faint I almost missed it. "Logan, I'm sorry." I stopped in my tracks. Those words sliced through me like a blade and soothed me like a balm all at once. Sorry. For what? For humiliating me all those years ago. For ending up here broken and defeated, for being human, for failing in a world that devours kindness and punishes hope. I didn't turn back. Couldn't. My chest ached with words I wasn't ready to say. So I kept walking, leaving her with the fire's gentle warmth and the silent forgiveness she didn't know I was carrying. Forgiveness I wasn't yet ready to speak out loud. I couldn't sleep that night. The mansion was dark and silent, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest until your breaths come out shallow and thin. I sat alone in my office, the only light coming from the endless city beyond the tall glass windows. New York pulsed with its usual rhythm, alive, arrogant, indifferent. Cars weaved through veins of glowing streets far below, and skyscrapers blinked in the humid summer darkness like silent titans keeping their secrets. I sipped my whiskey, feeling its burn slide down my throat and spread through my chest. But it did nothing to warm me. I could still see her in my mind, Olivia sitting by the fire, her tear-streaked face lit gold by the dancing flames. The way her shoulders curled in on themselves, as if trying to fold her entire being into something too small to hurt. Why did it ache so much to see her like that? She had once been the girl I watched from afar in school, the girl who walked through hallways with light in her smile, like the sun itself had chosen her as its favorite. She never knew how many times I lingered after class pretending to finish my notes, just to hear her laugh echo down the rows of desks. She never knew how many nights I lay awake whispering her name into the darkness, wondering what it felt like to be seen by her, to matter to her. But she never saw me, not back then. And now she looked at me with eyes that no longer held scorn or superiority, but something far worse, resignation. Shame. The eyes of someone who had fallen so far that the bruises from hitting the ground no longer mattered. The eyes of a woman who didn't even bother to hope anymore. I finished the last of my whiskey and leaned back in my chair, staring at the coffered ceiling. The silence in this mansion used to comfort me. It reminded me I had built something unbreakable, that I had won, that I was untouchable. But tonight, the silence felt like a weight pressing me into the earth. I stood up, my movements unsteady with exhaustion and alcohol, and walked through the dim halls to the guest wing. My footsteps echoed against marble floors, each one whispering her name in the dark. Slowly, I opened the door to her room. The faint smell of smoke, sweat, and fear clung to the air like ghosts that refused to leave. The twins were asleep on the bed, curled up together like kittens seeking warmth, their tiny faces soft and peaceful in the moonlight. But Olivia, she sat on the edge of the mattress, her back to the door, her silhouette etched against the window. The moonlight spilled over her tangled hair, illuminating the trembling line of her shoulders. "Why aren't you sleeping?" I asked softly, my voice breaking the quiet. She didn't turn. I don't remember how she whispered. Her voice was so thin, so hollow, it felt like it might shatter under its own weight. I walked forward and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I just stood there taking her in, the way her knuckles were white around the blanket, the way her breathing came in shallow, broken little gasps. Then I knelt down in front of her. She flinched slightly but didn't look away. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed with shadows of exhaustion and grief. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale beneath smudges of dirt. "Olivia," I said, my voice shaking despite how hard I tried to control it. "You're safe now." She let out a breathless laugh, a sound with no joy, only bitterness. "Safe," she echoed as if tasting the word and finding it sour. "You think giving me a warm bed for a night makes me safe, Logan. There are things broken in me that no mansion can fix." Something cracked deep inside my chest at her words. I wanted to gather her up, hold her so tightly that every shattered piece fell back into place. I wanted to wipe away every bruise life had left on her body and soul, to go back in time and shield her from every hand raised against her, every cruel word spat at her, every night spent in fear. But I couldn't. The past was beyond my reach, and the future was hers to choose. All I could do was stay. I reached out and gently took her hand. At first her fingers twitched as if she wanted to pull away, but then they tightened around mine with a desperation that nearly broke me. She didn't look at me, but tears slid down her face, silent and unstoppable, falling onto our joined hands like a quiet rain. "Sleep," I said softly. "Just for tonight. Let yourself rest." She closed her eyes, though tears still leaked from beneath her lashes. Her shoulders sagged, her breath slowing, and for the first time since she walked through my door, her body stopped trembling. She lay down carefully, pulling her knees to her chest, like a child clutching my hand, until sleep finally claimed her. I stayed there long after her breathing deepened, kneeling on the floor beside her bed, feeling the rise and fall of her chest through the slight pull of her fingers in mine. The moonlight pooled across her face, washing away the grime and exhaustion, leaving only the faintest ghost of the girl she used to be. In that moment, as guilt and longing twisted together in my gut, I realized the truth I had been avoiding for years. I didn't just want to save her. I didn't just want to heal her. I wanted her to need me. I wanted to be the reason she learned how to hope again. The reason she believed there was still light in the world. And as selfish and twisted as that was, I knew without a doubt that I would give her everything I had just to make that happen. I woke before dawn, my neck stiff and my knees aching from sleeping on the hardwood floor beside her bed. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there in the dim, pre-dawn glow, watching her breathe. Her hair spilled across the pillow in tangled dark waves, strands catching the faint blue light creeping through the curtains. In sleep, her face looked softer, younger, almost peaceful, if not for the crease between her brows, a stubborn shadow of worry that refused to fade even in her dreams. I wanted to reach out to brush that frown away with my thumb. I wanted to smooth her hair back and press my lips to her temple, whispering that everything would be okay, that she was safe, that she was home. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I pushed myself to my feet, wincing as pain shot through my joints, and walked out of the room. My footsteps echoed down the silent hallways, past tall windows draped in heavy velvet, past oil paintings of people I didn't know and never cared to. Downstairs, I stepped into my office and flicked on the desk lamp. The shadows retreated, revealing a kingdom of papers and contracts stacked in neat towers. Numbers, mergers, takeovers, control. All the things that made me who I was. All the things that had once made me feel invincible. But today, none of it mattered. I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. My lawyer answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. Mr. Bennett, I need you to do a background check. I said, my voice flat and cold. Jake Miller. Find everything you can about him. Where he is, what he does, who he owes, who he fears, everything. There was a pause on the line long enough for me to hear the rustle of sheets as he sat up. Understood. Anything specific you want to know first, if he's breathing? I said softly, dangerously, and for how long he plans to keep doing so. I ended the call before he could respond. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. I clenched it into a fist until my knuckles turned white, and the trembling stopped. Jake Miller. Even thinking his name made my jaw tighten until it ached. The golden boy, the charmer, the man who took Olivia's light and ground it into dust under his heel, walking away without a backward glance, leaving her with nothing but two daughters too young to understand why their mother cried at night, and eyes so dim they barely held reflections anymore. Rage burned through me, slow and cold, settling into my bones like winter frost. I wanted to destroy him, not for revenge, not just because he deserved it, but because some twisted, desperate part of me believed it was the only way to erase the shadows in her eyes, the only way to give her back what he had stolen. Hours passed before I returned to her room. The sun had risen, casting pale gold across the hallways. The girls were awake now, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, giggling softly as they played with stuffed animals Mrs. Harper must have brought them. Their laughter was thin, uncertain, like they weren't sure it was allowed here. Olivia sat by the window, staring out at the manicured gardens. The early morning light painted her face in delicate pastels, revealing every hollow of her cheeks, every bruise of exhaustion under her eyes. Her hands lay limply in her lap, fingers curled inward like she was trying to hold on to something only she could see. When she heard my footsteps, she turned. Her eyes were swollen from crying, rimmed with red, her lips dry and cracked. But today there was something new in her gaze, a flicker of something fragile. Uncertainty, perhaps. Hope, perhaps. Fear, definitely. "Good morning," I said softly. She nodded and looked down at her hands. "Thank you for last night." "You don't have to thank me," I replied, stepping closer. "You needed help, that's all." Her shoulders trembled, her thin blouse shifting with the movement. "I've needed help for a long time, Logan," she whispered, "but no one ever came." Her words sliced through me, clean and deep, leaving behind a wound I knew would never close. "I'm here now," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't care. She lifted her gaze to me, then eyes searching my face for something I wasn't sure I could give. Truth, motive, mercy, forgiveness. I didn't know which. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this for me after everything, after how I treated you in school? Why do you care?" I stared at her, the words lodging in my throat like shards of glass. "Because I loved you. Because I still do. Because seeing you like this is killing me. Because saving you makes me feel like I finally matter. Because if you need me, maybe I can finally breathe again." But I didn't say any of that. I couldn't. She wasn't ready to hear it, and maybe I wasn't ready to say it, because no one deserves to suffer like this. I said instead, my tone flat, almost cold. "Not even you." Her eyes flinched at the harshness in my voice, and part of me hated myself for it. But another part, the darker part, felt a twisted relief. Because if she hated me, at least she would feel something. Anything. Even if it was anger. "Come downstairs," I said, turning away before she could see the storm raging in my eyes. "You and the girls need breakfast." As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, suit perfectly tailored hair, immaculately styled expression, calm and controlled. But behind my eyes there was a darkness even I didn't fully understand. I told myself I was saving her because it was the right thing to do, because it was moral, because no one else would. But deep down beneath the charity and the guilt and the hollow nobility, I knew the truth. I was saving her because I couldn't bear a world where she no longer existed. I was saving her because I needed to be needed. I was saving her because if I didn't, there would be nothing left of the boy who once sat in the back row, clutching his pencil, watching her laugh in the sunlight, and dreaming, just for a moment, that he was someone worth loving. I watched her from across the dining table. She sat with her shoulders hunched, spooning oatmeal into Hazel's mouth with quiet, mechanical movements. Harper sat beside her chewing a piece of buttered toast, her eyes flicking between her mother and me with wary curiosity. The house was silent except for the clink of metal on porcelain and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Outside, morning sunlight spilled into the garden, glinting off the dew-soaked grass. But in here, everything felt muted, gray, as though her despair swallowed even the colors around her. "Eat," I said quietly, pushing a plate of scrambled eggs closer to her. She flinched at my voice as though I'd struck her. Her eyes lifted, and for a second I saw it, a flicker of the girl she once was. Proud, untouchable, bright like a flame. Then it was gone, replaced by resignation. "I'm not hungry," she whispered. "Eat anyway." Her fingers tightened around the spoon. Hazel tugged her sleeve, whining for more oatmeal. Olivia forced a smile and fed her daughter, her hand trembling so badly that oatmeal dripped onto the table. Something twisted in my chest. Anger, pity, longing. It was all the same now. I leaned back in my chair, watching her every move, the dark hollows under her eyes, the way her sweater hung loose over bones that shouldn't be so sharp, the way her hair fell in limp, greasy strands around her face. She used to be beautiful, untouchable, a goddess in a school hallway crowded with nobodies like me. And now she was mine to protect, mine to save. But saving her felt too much like owning her, and I wasn't sure which one I wanted more. When breakfast was done, I stood. The twins scrambled off their chairs, their tiny feet pattering against the marble floor as they chased each other into the living room. Olivia remained seated, staring at her cold oatmeal, her shoulders trembling. I walked around the table and stopped behind her chair. For a moment, I just stood there watching her breathe. She smelled faintly of smoke and stale sweat, but beneath it I caught something else, something sweet and broken that made my pulse quicken in my throat. I bent down my lips close to her ear. "You're not alone anymore," I murmured. She flinched, her knuckles white around her spoon. "I know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "That's what scares me." I straightened and left the room before I did something I'd regret, like touch her hair or kiss the bruise of sorrow in her voice. Because right now, I didn't trust myself to know the difference between wanting to save her and wanting to keep her forever. I walked into my office and shut the door behind me. The lock clicked in the silent room like a gun cocking, final and cold. I loosened my tie, exhaling slowly, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging in my chest. The city lights outside the window burned like distant fires against the night, reflections flickering in the glass like ghosts I couldn't shake. My lawyer had called earlier. He found Jake Miller, the golden boy, the king of high school hallways, the one who once ruled with nothing but a smile and a wink. Now he was managing a failing auto repair shop on the outskirts of Queens, drowning in gambling debt and unpaid child support for other kids he'd left behind. A pathetic, bloated husk of the man he used to be, rotting quietly in the shadows of a life he'd squandered. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, triumphant. But I didn't, because none of it, his failures, his debts, his ruin, could give Olivia back the years he stole. The light he crushed, the hope he poisoned, until it shriveled inside her. I grabbed my coat and keys, moving with a mechanical precision that came from years of calculated decisions. The drive out of Manhattan was silent, except for the roar of my blood in my ears. Each red light felt like a slap across my face, each slow-moving car ahead of me a deliberate insult to my rage. By the time I pulled up outside the grimy auto shop, my hands were clenched around the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles burned white and numb. Jake was outside wiping grease from his fingers with a rag, leaning against the dented hood of an old pickup truck. His hair was thinning temples, graying a beer belly, stretching the faded fabric of his t-shirt. But his eyes were still the same. Cold, selfish, empty of remorse. He didn't recognize me at first. He squinted in the dark. Then his eyes narrowed, a sneer curling across his unshaven face. Logan Bennett? He scoffed. His voice was hoarse with cigarettes and cheap beer. What the hell are you doing here, rich boy? Need your tires changed or something? I stared at him, silent, feeling memories bleed into the night. Olivia at 17, golden and laughing as she clung to his arm by the lockers. Me invisible in the background, hiding behind textbooks, just wishing for a moment that I could be him. That I could be the boy she looked at like that. But now he was nothing, and I was everything. I came to talk about Olivia, I said, my voice quiet. Too quiet. He barked out a laugh, tossing the rag aside. What, that bitch tracked you down? She's still milking pity from rich idiots' figures. Something inside me snapped with an audible crack in my soul. Before he could blink, I closed the distance between us, grabbing his collar and slamming him back against the truck. The metal buckled under his weight, with a dull groan echoing through the silent lot. Don't you ever call her that again? I snarled, my voice shaking with fury. His eyes widened, flickering with fear for the first time in a long, worthless life. Hey, calm down, man, calm down, I hissed, leaning closer so he could see every murderous shadow flickering in my gaze. She gave you everything. Her body, her heart, her dreams, her future. And you threw her away like trash. You left her to rot on the streets with your daughters starving beside her, and you didn't even fucking blink. He scoffed, trying to shove me off. They're not my problem. I didn't ask for any brats. She knew what she was getting into. Don't come blaming me for her bad choices. Rage pulsed through me, white hot and blinding. I slammed him harder against the truck, my forearm pressing into his throat until his words cut off in a choked gasp. His face turned crimson, eyes bulging with panic. Listen to me, I said, my voice shaking with controlled violence, low and intimate like a lover's whisper. You will never come near her again. You will never breathe her name. If I hear you've tried to contact her, if you so much as think about her, I will ruin you. I will bury you so deep in debt and court orders that you'll pray for prison to escape it. I will dismantle whatever pathetic life you have left piece by piece until you forget what the sun looks like. Do you understand me? He gurgled a strangled sound, nodding frantically, tears welling in his eyes as his hands clawed at my arm. I released him. He slid down the truck, coughing and clutching his throat, spit dribbling down his chin as he gasped for breath. I stood over him, my heart pounding like war drums in my chest, my vision pulsing with red at the edges. For once in your miserable life, I said, voice trembling with disgust and finality, do the right thing. Stay away from them. I turned and walked back to my car, my steps echoing in the silent lot like gunshots. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, the taste of violence bitter and metallic on my tongue. But beneath the anger, beneath the protective rage that burned so brightly, there was something darker and colder thrumming in my chest. I didn't do this just to protect her. I did it because part of me wanted to own her pain, to erase every man before me so that when she finally looked up from the ashes of her life, when she finally reached for a hand in the darkness, it would only ever be mine. As I drove back to the mansion, the city blurred around me in streaks of light and shadow. All I saw was her face, her tears, her broken pride, the quiet, desperate surrender in her eyes. And I swore to myself with every dark, twisted corner of my soul, no matter how long it took, no matter what monster I had to become, I would make sure Olivia Carter never felt alone again, even if it meant that in the end, she would only ever have me. I was sitting by the window when I heard his car pull into the driveway. The girls were napping in the guest room, their tiny bodies curled together like two fragile blossoms trying to survive a winter frost. The mansion was silent, but my chest felt loud, my heart pounding so hard it ached in my ribs. When Logan walked in, I didn't turn. I kept staring at the garden, the sun sliding behind gray clouds, drowning the world in a dull, cold light. But I felt him, every step, every breath. Like gravity itself had shifted to follow him. "Where were you?" I asked softly, my voice barely carrying across the room. "Out," he said. His tone was flat, but underneath it was something rough, like stones scraping against each other. I swallowed my throat dry. Did you go to work?" There was a pause. Then I felt his presence behind me, heat radiating from his body. As he stood so close, I could almost feel his coat brushing my hair. "No," he said quietly. "I went to see Jake." I flinched. My breath hitched and fogged the window in front of me. My fingers tightened around the edge of the seat. "Why?" I whispered. The word came out choked, weak, pathetic. Because he needed to know. Logan said, his voice low and calm, too calm. He needed to understand what he threw away. And he needed to understand what would happen if he ever tried to crawl back into your life. I closed my eyes. Shame burned hot behind my eyelids. "You shouldn't have done that." "I had to," he murmured. "For you." "No," I breathed, shaking my head. "You did it for yourself." Silence fell. Heavy. Almost suffocating. Then his hand was in my hair, fingers threading through the tangled strands so gently, it broke something inside me. I shivered under his touch. Tears welling in my eyes before I could stop them. "You're right," he said, his voice tight with something I couldn't name. "I did it for myself. Because I can't stand knowing he walked away while you stayed behind to drown. I can't stand that he left you to sleep on sidewalks and beg for scraps while he lived his pathetic little life without consequence." A tear slipped down my cheek. His thumb brushed it away. His touch was warm, firm, possessive. "Look at me, Olivia," he said. I shook my head. I couldn't. If I looked at him, I'd break. And there was nothing left inside me to rebuild with. "Please," he whispered softer now, almost pleading. "Look at me." I turned, slowly. His face was so close. His eyes burned with something that terrified me, something that thrilled me, a storm raging just for me. "You're safe now," he said. His hand slid to the side of my neck, his thumb resting over my pulse, feeling the frantic beat beneath my skin. "You're safe because I say so." My tears fell harder at that. I hated the truth in his words. I hated that a part of me, the broken, battered part, found comfort in his darkness. Because what was safety if not belonging to someone strong enough to protect you even from yourself? "Why are you doing this to me?" I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of every emotion I'd buried. His lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. His eyes never left mine. "Because I can't stop," he said softly. "Because every time I look at you, all I can think is mine." My breath caught. The room felt smaller, the world narrowed to nothing but him, his scent of crisp cologne and distant whiskey, his warmth, his quiet fury at the man who destroyed me, and his silent promise to never let me go. And for the first time in so long, I felt something flicker in the ashes of my chest. Fear, longing, hope, love. I didn't know what it was. I only knew it felt like drowning in a sea I didn't want to leave. I couldn't get her out of my head. Even after I left her sitting by the window, tears carving pale rivers down her cheeks. Her image burned behind my eyes like an afterimage of staring at the sun. The way her eyes flickered with something dangerously close to surrender when I whispered mine. The way her lips parted as if she wanted to protest, but couldn't find the strength to form words. I sat in my office long after the sun dipped beyond the horizon, letting darkness fill the room around me. I didn't turn on the lights. Outside, the moon hung low, cold, and indifferent. Its pale glow spilled across the manicured gardens, casting the tall hedges into elongated shadows like skeletal fingers clawing across the grass. Somewhere down the hallway, Hazel whimpered in her sleep, her cry muffled by distance until I heard Olivia's quiet humming drift through the silent house. That sound, it gutted me, a soft, broken lullaby weaving through marble halls that had never known warmth. She shouldn't have to sing her daughters back to sleep in a stranger's mansion, wearing a borrowed nightgown, her hair still tangled with street dust. She shouldn't have to fear every dawn, wondering if she would be dragged back onto that freezing sidewalk to sleep beneath neon flickers and passing headlights. She shouldn't, but she did. Because the world was cruel. Because men like Jake Miller existed. Because people like me let it happen as long as it didn't touch us. But it touched me now. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor with a harsh screech that echoed like a gunshot. I walked down the silent hallway to her room, each step louder in my ears than my own heartbeat. I didn't knock. I opened the door and stepped inside, silent as the night itself. The lamp by her bed cast a golden halo across the room. Olivia sat cross-legged on the mattress, folding the twins' new clothes into neat piles. Her hair was brushed, now clean and shining under the lamplight, falling over her shoulders like a dark, silken curtain. Her face was scrubbed raw, but the bruises beneath her eyes remained. Bruises no soap could wash away. She froze when she saw me. Her fingers tightened around a tiny pink sweater as if she could shield herself with it. "Logan," she whispered. Her voice always sounded broken at first, raspy, hesitant, as though every word cut her throat open. "Why aren't you asleep?" I asked, ignoring the storm roaring in my chest. She lowered her gaze, focusing on her trembling hands. "I can't. My mind, it won't stop." I stepped closer, each footfall sinking me deeper into something I knew I could never crawl out of again. When I reached the edge of her bed, I saw her shoulders quivering, her breath coming in sharp, silent sobs. Tears slid down her cheeks, catching the lamplight like shards of glass. "What is it?" I asked softly, though I already knew. She shook her head, wiping her face with the back of her hand like a child denied comfort. "I don't know how to live like this," she whispered, her voice trembling with grief. "In a warm bed with clean clothes, food waiting downstairs. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. The nights on the sidewalk. The men who spat at me. The people who pretended not to see me. I keep waiting for someone to come and drag me out of here back into the cold. her words carved into me like knives dipped in ice. I reached out and took the tiny sweater from her white-knuckled grip, setting it aside on the blanket. Then I cupped her face between my palms. Her skin was soft and damp with tears. She refused to meet my gaze, staring down at the sheets, as though afraid of what she might see reflected in my eyes. "Look at me, Olivia." Slowly, she did. Her eyes were wide and glazed with grief, swollen from crying lashes, clumped with tears. But beneath all that pain burned something else, a desperate flickering light that trembled with fragile hope. "You're not going back there?" I said, my thumbs brushing tears across her cheeks. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care what I have to do. You and your daughters will never see that life again." Her lips quivered around a sob. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" I should have told her the truth. That I had loved her since the first time I saw her in sophomore English, biting her pencil and staring out the window with dreams in her eyes. That even when she laughed at me with her friends, I memorized the sound. That seeing her broken now felt like watching a cathedral crumble under bombs, and all I wanted was to stand in the ruins and cradle every shattered stone. But the truth was darker than that. I wanted her, all of her. Her pain, her fear, her hope. I wanted to be the only thing she clung to in the dark, the only warmth she trusted, the only God she prayed to. Because then she could never leave me. Because I can. I said instead, my voice quiet, almost gentle. Because no one else will. She sobbed then, a small, keening sound that broke something feral inside me. Her hands reached up, clutching my wrists, her thin fingers curling around my shirt cuffs like a lifeline. I pulled her into my chest. She collapsed against me, her tears soaking through my shirt, burning my skin with every drop. I held her tightly, pressing her closer, until I felt her heartbeat thrum weakly against mine. "It's okay," I whispered into her hair, breathing in the scent of soap and salt. "Cry, scream, break. I'll put you back together." She didn't reply. She just buried her face into the hollow of my throat, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And in that moment, as I held her trembling body, feeling every fractured piece of her press against me, something inside me shifted into place. It wasn't love. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even desire. It was deeper, darker. A truth that slithered around my ribs and pulsed with every beat of my heart. She was broken, and I was going to fix her. But when I was done, she would never be able to survive without me again. And God help me, that was exactly how I wanted it. I fell asleep in his arms. I didn't mean to. I never meant to. But his warmth seeped into my bones like morphine, numbing the ache I carried in my chest, until my eyelids grew too heavy to fight. In my dreams, I was standing barefoot in the snow. The world around me was nothing but white and gray, an endless field of silent frost under a sky the color of bruises. I was shivering. The cold burned my feet, slicing into my skin like tiny shards of glass. I wanted to scream, but the world swallowed every sound before it left my lips. I looked down at my arms. Empty, my daughters were gone. Panic surged up my throat, choking me with fear. Hazel, but only silence answered me. I fell to my knees, the ice biting into my skin. Tears blurred my vision. My hands scraped across the snow, digging, searching, clawing at the frozen earth, as if I could pull them out from beneath it. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I looked up and saw him. Logan. But not Logan. His suit was black as midnight, his shirt open at the throat, the wind blowing his hair back from his sharp, expressionless face. His eyes burned like molten iron, cold, unforgiving, possessive. In his hand was a chain. At the end of it, my daughters. They stood behind him, small and trembling chains wrapped around their wrists. But their eyes were calm, trusting, like they didn't even see the steel binding them. Let them go. I screamed, my voice ripping from my throat like glass. Please, Logan, let them go. He didn't speak. He simply looked down at me, his expression blank, his eyes glowing with an endless, quiet hunger. Then he knelt before me and reached out, brushing his thumb across my cheek. You're shaking, he said softly, his voice echoing inside my skull like a prayer or a curse. Come here. I wanted to run. Every cell in my body screamed at me to run, but my feet stayed frozen to the ice. He smiled then. A slow, quiet smile that never reached his eyes. You don't need to be afraid, he whispered, leaning closer. His breath was warm against my ear, melting the frost on my skin. You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine. His lips pressed against my forehead, searing hot, branding me. I closed my eyes, and in that moment the fear and cold vanished. Warmth spread through my body, thick and heavy. Safe, comforting, addictive. I let out a sob. I didn't know if it was from relief or terror. When I opened my eyes, the chains were gone. The snow melted. I was back in his mansion, lying on his bed, his arms around me like steel bars. My daughters slept, curled up on the couch across the room, breathing softly. Logan's chest rose and fell beneath my cheek, his heartbeat slow and steady. His scent wrapped around me, musk, cologne, something darker I couldn't name. I tried to move, but his arms tightened instantly, pinning me to him. Don't, he murmured, half asleep. Stay. And I did. Because as much as his darkness terrified me, the world beyond his arms terrified me more. I closed my eyes again, feeling tears slip down my temples into his pillow. The truth tasted bitter on my tongue. He was no savior. He was the cage I chose to live in. Because in the end, cages are warm, and freedom is cold. I woke before dawn. The room was still dark, only a faint gray glow seeping in through the heavy curtains. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. My eyes darted across the ceiling, searching for cracks in plaster, for dripping rain, for the distant roar of traffic that always meant I was lying on cold concrete. But all I saw was silence. Clean, perfect silence. Then I felt him. His arm was draped over my waist, heavy and warm, pinning me in place. His chest pressed against my back, rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. His breath tickled the nape of my neck, sending shivers across my skin. I lay there listening to him breathe, feeling the heat of his body seep into mine. And for a single fleeting moment, I felt safe. But the feeling was poisoned by the truth that followed. I wasn't safe. I was owned. Slowly, carefully, I tried to slide out from under his arm. But the moment I moved, his grip tightened. His fingers curled around my hip, digging into my flesh with silent warning. Where do you think you're going? He murmured against my ear, his voice thick with sleep but edged with steel. I need to check on the girls, I whispered. They're fine, he said, his tone final. Stay. My body went rigid. I felt his lips brush against the shell of my ear, sending a pulse of heat straight down my spine. Olivia, he whispered, and the way he said my name made something deep inside me clench with fear and something else I hated to name. Do you know what I dreamt of last night? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What he chuckled softly, the sound vibrating against my back. I dreamt of you, kneeling at my feet, looking up at me with those wide eyes, begging me to never let you go. A tremor ran through me. Shame burned across my skin. I hated him for saying it. I hated myself for the way my body reacted, the way heat coiled low in my belly at his words. "Why are you saying this to me?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" His hand slid up from my hip to my ribs, his thumb brushing the underside of my breast, not quite touching, but enough to make my breath hitch. "Because it's true," he said softly. "Because you think you want freedom. You think you want to run. But I see you, Olivia. I see the way you tremble when I touch you. The way your eyes plead for something you don't even understand." Tears welled in my eyes, spilling silently onto the pillow. "That's not true," I whispered, my voice so small it barely sounded like mine. "It is," he murmured, pressing his lips to the back of my neck. "And one day you'll stop fighting it. You'll realize that this me, my touch, my darkness, is the only place you ever feel safe." A sob escaped my lips. I hated him. I hated him for knowing me so well, for seeing parts of me I didn't want to admit existed. "Please," I whispered, my tears soaking the pillow. "Don't do this to me." His arms tightened around me, crushing me to his chest. I felt his heartbeat slow, calm, unbreakable. "I'm not doing anything to you," he said quietly. "I'm giving you what you've always wanted. A place to belong. Someone to kneel to, someone to worship. Someone to save you even from yourself." He kissed my temple, soft and possessive like a brand burned into my skin. "Sleep," he ordered. "You'll need your strength. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding your life. But never forget Olivia." His voice dropped to a whisper, dark and tender. "You're only rebuilding it because I allow it. Because you're mine. And I don't let go of what's mine." My tears fell harder. But I didn't fight him. I couldn't. Because in that moment, wrapped in his darkness, caged by his warmth, with his breath against my ear and his arm heavy across my waist, I felt it again. That horrible, addictive relief. Because no matter how deep his shadows ran, being his prisoner felt safer than being free. Morning came with a soft gray light seeping through the curtains. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Logan move around the room. The clink of his watch as he slid it onto his wrist. The quiet rustle of fabric as he tied his tie. Every sound etched itself into my bones, branding me with the knowledge of his presence. "Get up," he said, his voice calm, but carrying that undercurrent of command that always made my stomach twist. "Today is important." I forced myself to sit up. My body felt heavy, like I was carrying chains no one else could see. He watched me as I swung my legs off the bed, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Wear something clean," he said. "Mrs. Harper laid out clothes for you." I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. I heard him walk closer, felt the heat of his body behind me, before his hand slid into my hair, brushing it aside to expose the side of my neck. His thumb pressed lightly against my pulse point. "You're trembling," he murmured. "I'm cold," I lied. His chuckle was soft, almost affectionate. "Liar." He leaned down, his lips grazing my skin, a touch so gentle it made my chest ache with something dangerously close to longing. "Get dressed," he whispered. "I want to show you something." He took me downtown that morning. The girls stayed home with Mrs. Harper. I felt naked without them, like I'd left the last pieces of myself behind. Logan's driver opened the car door for me, and I stepped out into a world of polished glass towers and men in tailored suits striding across marble lobbies. "This way," Logan set his hand on my lower back, guiding me through the revolving doors of a tall, imposing building. We took the elevator to the 23rd floor. As the doors slid open, I saw it, an entire open office lined with glass walls overlooking the city skyline. Desks, computers, phones, the quiet hum of controlled power. "What is this?" I whispered, He turned to me, his eyes locked on mine, dark and unreadable. "This is where you'll work," he said. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Work," I echoed. My voice sounded small, weak. He nodded. "You want to rebuild your life? This is how you'll do it. You'll start as my assistant. You'll learn. You'll grow. You'll earn your own money and stand on your own 2 feet again." My chest tightened painfully. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell him I wasn't ready, that I was nothing but bruises and empty spaces where hope used to live, that his world of steel and glass and perfect suits would crush me in seconds. But another part, the part that still clung to any flicker of worth left in me, wanted it, needed it. Because if I didn't take this chance, I would always be the woman sitting on the sidewalk begging strangers for scraps. I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say yes," he said, his voice low and quiet, but so commanding that my knees felt weak. I looked up at him, at the man who both saved me and caged me, at the man whose touch terrified me but whose absence would terrify me more. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking. "I'll do it." His lips curved into a slow smile. For a moment, he almost looked proud. But then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingertips brushing my cheek with unbearable gentleness. "Good girl," he murmured. My stomach twisted at those words. Shame burned in my chest. But beneath it, something else flickered. Something dark and warm that made me want to cry. He turned and walked toward his office, gesturing for me to follow. And I did. Because no matter how hard I tried to deny it, no matter how much I wanted to run, I would always follow him. Because in his darkness I felt seen, and in his chains I felt safe. My first day at his company felt like stepping onto another planet. Everything gleamed under bright fluorescent lights, marble floors, glass partitions, polished brass nameplates. People moved like clockwork men in dark suits. Women in elegant dresses, all with sharp eyes and sharper voices. Efficiency pulsed through the walls like an electric current. I felt out of place the moment I stepped out of the elevator. Logan walked beside me, his hand resting lightly on my lower back as he guided me through the halls. Every person we passed greeted him with deference, murmuring, "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." Their eyes flicked to me with polite curiosity before darting away. They didn't see the bruises inside me. They didn't see the shaking girl clutching her daughters in the cold. They only saw a woman in a pressed blouse and pencil skirt walking beside their powerful CEO. But I felt their questions scratching at my skin. Who is she? Why is she here? We reached his office, a vast corner room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The furniture was minimalist, black leather, chrome, immaculate. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a sleek chair across from his massive desk. I obeyed without thinking. My hands twisted in my lap as I watched him shrug off his suit jacket and drape it over his chair. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing strong forearms corded with muscle and veins. There was something intimate in the way he moved, as though I was seeing a version of him no one else did. "This is where you'll work," he said, his voice low and calm. "You'll start by organizing my schedules, screening calls, preparing preliminary reports. Mrs. Harper has arranged care for the girls during the day, and you'll return home with me every evening. Every evening, home, his home." The words wrapped around my chest like chains. "I don't know how to do any of that," I whispered, shame burning in my throat. He leaned back in his chair, dark eyes locked on mine, sharp and assessing. "Then learn," he said simply. Tears welled in my eyes. I blinked them back furiously, refusing to let him see me break again. but he saw it anyway. He always did. He stood and walked around the desk, stopping in front of me. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as he reached down and tilted my chin up with his thumb and forefinger. "Listen to me," he murmured, his voice softer now, but no less commanding. "You are not that woman on the sidewalk anymore. You are here. You are mine. And you will become everything I know you can be." My breath shuddered out of me. Mine. He kept saying it. Every time it carved deeper into my bones until I wasn't sure if the pain was agony or relief. "I'll try," I whispered. His lips curved into a faint smile. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, lingering there until my pulse hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Good girl," he said softly. Then he turned away, his hand falling from my face, leaving my skin burning where he touched me. The day passed in a blur of instructions, phone calls, and endless stacks of documents. Logan barely spoke except to give curt directions. But every time I glanced at him, his eyes were on me. Dark, watchful, possessive. When I faltered typing an email, he was there leaning over me, his chest brushing my shoulder, his scent wrapping around me until I could barely breathe. When I dropped a file, he bent to pick it up before I could, his fingers brushing mine, his gaze catching mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. And every time he touched me, even the smallest brush of his hand, my body lit up with equal parts fear and a desperate aching need I didn't want to name. By evening, I was exhausted. My head throbbed, my eyes burned, my fingers trembled from typing and filing for hours. Logan didn't comment on my fatigue. He simply gathered his things and gestured for me to follow him to the elevator. The ride down was silent. His presence filled the space, heavy and suffocating and strangely comforting all at once. When we reached the car, he opened the door for me. As I slid into the leather seat, I felt his hand close around my ankle, holding me in place. My breath caught as I looked up at him. His eyes burned into mine. Dark, possessive, unyielding. "You did well today," he said quietly. "But remember, Olivia." His grip tightened just enough to make me gasp softly. "Your life is yours only because I allow it to be." He released me and shut the door before I could respond. As he walked around to the driver's side, tears welled in my eyes. My hands curled into fists in my lap. Because the worst part wasn't his words. It was the way my heart fluttered at them. The way my body relaxed under his threat like a prisoner who had grown to love her cage. And as the car pulled away from the gleaming towers behind us, all I could think was, "God help me." I don't want to be free, but Logan was never the final chapter. Somewhere in the shadows of this city, another man was watching. Someone who knew Olivia's past far better than Logan ever could. Someone who had been waiting all this time, waiting to reclaim what he believed was his. Thank you for following Olivia and Logan's story until now. Your support means everything to me. If you want to know who this man is and what he plans to do with Olivia, stay tuned for the next chapter. Comment "I'm ready" if you want part 2 of this dark journey.